Today we've got a mini RC car that's 1/16 scale, comes fully ready to run including the Lipo Battery, and costs only $150. But is it any good? Well, today we dive deep into the world of the Losi Mini B Buggy to see how it drives, how fast is it, and lastly, how fast is the Brushless Conversion Kit. If you're familiar with 1/10 scale sized race buggies, you'll understand the Mini B because it's a darn near exact recreation of one, and it comes as a fully ready to run model right out of the box. Now this buggy comes with 3 available color schemes. There's a blue, a black, and this yellow, and all 3 buggies include the same items. They include a 2.4 GHz transmitter, AAA batteries for that transmitter, a 2-cell Lipo battery, and a USB battery charger. So everything needed to get this little buggy up and driving is included. To drive the car, you just have to charge the Lipo and install the transmitter batteries. Now for charge times, the included USB charger will fully charge the battery in about an hour. To speed things up, we ended up using this basic $20 EcoPower charger to charge the battery in about half the time. Thankfully, the buggy is really easy to get up and running, and thanks to its unique 1/16 scale size, you don't need much room to drive it. For sizing, the Mini B comes in at only 10.7 inches long, 7 inches wide, and 4 inches tall. Now here's what that looks like against the Mini T 2.0 brushless, which Losi calls 1/18 scale, even though these two vehicles share almost all the same parts. The main difference is the chassis length, with the buggy chassis being longer, which we'll talk more about later. Now for some other size comparisons, here's the 1/24 scale SCX 24 with the Mini B. Here's the 16 scale Mini B with a 10 scale buggy, and then an 8 scale buggy. And then to really drive home the point, here's the 1/6 scale Super Baja Ray and the Mini B. So yeah, the Mini B is pretty dang small, and it's meant to be a recreation of the TLR 22 race buggy, which of course is a 10 scale vehicle, but proportionally, the Mini B looks just like it, just smaller. The Mini B buggy is built off of a 1.5mm thick aluminum chassis plate with a rear-wheel driven drivetrain, independent suspension, a gear differential, threaded 7mm oil-filled shocks, and adjustable turnbuckles. The vehicle is also ball bearing supported and uses 1.5mm hex hardware throughout, and 1 little wrench is included, but a proper hex driver is so much easier to use. Lastly, you'll also find a slipper clutch on the Mini B that you can access and adjust after removing the gear guard. Now with the tires and wheels, the Mini B uses a specialty size, but on the front tires are tapered pins with BK bars in the rear, which are another recreation from the racing world. Now pop off the 5.5mm wheel nuts and you'll see a plastic 8mm axle hex. These rubber tires are designed for dirt. They'll work on the street though, but they will wear out faster. Alright, I'm sure you're all wondering, how fast is the Mini B? With the included battery fully charged, we set out to answer this. Unfortunately, rain is stopping us from our normal speed run location, so we find shelter in a covered parking garage, but our GPS speed meter doesn't work in here, so we use our radar gun. Now we're not afraid to get the Mini B a little wet because the electronics are waterproof, but we want a somewhat dry surface, so a wet surface doesn't hinder our speeds, which, after a few passes, we realized was about 13 miles an hour with the included brushed electronics. Now we haven't talked about the electronics at all, but inside the Mini B it uses a 280 sized 47 turn brushed motor in a mid-motor transmission configuration. So that places the motor in front of the rear axle, not behind it. Now this is a great setup for surfaces with a lot of traction, but if a surface doesn't have as much traction, it's going to be a little bit harder to keep this thing going straight and not spinning out. Now that 280 sized motor is hardwired to a 2-in-1 speed controller and receiver unit, with only the steering servo being plugged in. That servo is pretty dang quick, by the way, and features a servo saver horn to absorb impact energy, with the downside that it absorbs some of the steering precision. Now to remedy this, Losi offers this aluminum servo horn optionally for a direct connection and no steering loss. The last piece of our electronics is the included 2S Lipo battery with an EC2 connector. This battery features 20C and 6,500 milliamp hours of capacity, which is good enough for 13 miles an hour with a brushed motor. But what about the brushless conversion kit? Let me start by saying that 13 miles an hour for a car of this size is pretty dang fast, especially if you'll be driving this in tight areas or indoors. You don't need a whole lot of speed to have a good time with this. But for the people who do want more speed, the Brushless Conversion Kit from Dynamite offers a 2-in-1 unit that has the speed controller built right into the motor. And it's a pretty slick setup, but to make it work in the Mini B, one more item is required. And it's this receiver. Now the stock factory receiver in the car is part of a 2-in-1 unit with the receiver / speed controller like we mentioned before. And when you remove that to install the conversion kit, it leaves the vehicle without a receiver. Now for the experienced RCer, or if you're somebody who already races, there's a good chance you already have a transmitter and receiver that you can add and bind and use in this vehicle. But if not, the easiest and least expensive route to take is to just pick up this $15 Spectrum receiver and to bind it to the included transmitter. And that's what we did. Now the whole conversion took only about 30 minutes of work, including binding that receiver and then doing a quick calibration on the ESC. Overall, it's an easy conversion with some pretty rewarding results. If you're not already subscribed, go do it. For top speeds, we went back to that parking garage using the stock 18-tooth pinion gear and a freshly charged battery. After a few passes, we managed to get 26 miles an hour, which is a 100% speed increase over the brushed. Now, if you're really particular about the top speeds, you may be able to get 1 or more miles an hour out of this vehicle by using the battery that comes with the brushless Mini T 2.0, because that battery has a 50C discharge rate, where the one included with the Mini B is a 20C discharge rate. Now, speaking of the Mini T 2.0, there's a lot of parts from that truck that'll work on this buggy. Now, when we unboxed a Mini 2 2.0 brushless, inside the box was this list of option parts, and this list was not included in our Mini B, even though all of these parts are compatible on the Mini B. Now on our site, AMainHobbies.com, we've linked all of these parts into the Mini B category, where all of the replacement and option parts for the Mini B live, like these titanium turnbuckles, chassis protectors, CV drive shafts, aluminum nut kits, tires, wheels, bodies, and more. So you can upgrade the buggy to personalize it or to be the perfect racer, because there are tracks racing the Mini Bs. And with the suspension being highly adjustable, the buggies can be tuned to the different types of track surfaces, just like the big buggies. Now, before we dive too much into the Mini T versus Mini B, we had an issue with this buggy that I want to tell you guys about. Now, it's a really small issue, but essentially with the size of this vehicle, it's pretty dang easy to over-tighten screws and nuts and things like that, because everything is just smaller on this vehicle. For instance, when we were checking out the tires and the wheel nuts, I happened to tighten this wheel nut just a little too tight, and I noticed the wheel was bound up somehow on the axle, almost like the plastic in the wheel is kind of being crushed when you over-tighten the nut. And I realized how easy it is to over-tighten and bind up the car. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, Mini T 2.0 versus the Mini B. Both mini vehicles, very similar, yet different. Now underneath the bodies, both vehicles share almost all the parts, but the buggy uses a longer chassis, making the proportions different even if the vehicles are about the same size. And that's why I'm guessing the buggy is 1/16th scale and the truck is considered 1/18th. Now, other than the chassis though, the front ends, the rear ends, the transmission, steering assembly, shocks, diffs, all of that is cross-compatible. The only things that aren't are the shock towers, because the buggy has no body mount holes, and of course the buggy uses different front tires, wing, and wing parts. Now, what I really enjoy about the buggy compared to the truck is that the body comes off with only one clip, where the truck uses 4. And in the buggy, the battery is secured down with this rubber band, so it's super easy and convenient, where the truck uses 2 body clips. The last thing I really like about the buggy is it's a little bit better on how the chassis has more room to sit all of the electronics flat, where on the truck space is so limited, the receiver has to be mounted up on the battery brace, sacrificing that optimal center of gravity. Now the last thing to consider is the Mini B cost $150 and the Mini T is $140, and that's for the brushed versions of the vehicles. If you want brushless, there isn't one for the Mini B, but probably will down the road. But for the Mini T 2.0, you can get the brushless version for about $200. Now if you want a Mini B brushless, you're gonna have to do the conversion, and you'll need to buy the Dynamite brushless system for an extra $70 and then that $15 receiver. But trust me guys, you don't need the brushless system in the Mini B to have a good time. Little RC cars like this are excellent party cars to bust out for when friends come over, family for the holidays, or for somebody's birthday. Whatever the case, this is a proper hobby grade RC car that anyone can have fun with, all for about $150. Pretty hard to beat that. Guys, go check out the Mini B, the Mini T, and the brushless conversion with our links down below. And check out these videos for more RC.